the Eagle Badger podcast.
Hello, how are you doing? This is not a new sheriff in town, but a new podcast, and this shall be called the Eagle Badger. And it promises to be very exciting. The focus shall be politics, people, and policy. And of course, you should expect the very best on this very important podcast. My name is Ariyo Dare-Atoye.
And my name is Anenih. Today, what we're going to touch on, 4 stories within an hour. We will be speaking on the Companies and Allied Matters Act that was just signed by the President. We'll be speaking on the unemployment figures just released by the National Bureau of Statistics. Yes, we'll touch on the trouble that seems to be unfolding with the between National Broadcasting Commission and the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, and concerns about a quiet hate speech bill that might have been introduced. And we will round up this tour with a quick stop at Edo State to see what's going on ahead of the elections next month.
Absolutely.
So I'll start very quickly by just diving straight in and reading a story from the Vanguard. So August 7, 2020, Buhari signs amended Companies and Allied Matters Bill, CAMA 2020. President Buhari on Friday in Abuja assented to the Companies and Allied Matters Bill recently passed by the National Assembly. In a statement signed by the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, the President's action on this important piece of legislation therefore repealed and replaced the extant Companies and Allied Matters Act 1990, introducing after 30 years several corporate legal innovations geared towards enhancing ease of doing business in the country. I'll stop reading there. Ariyo, the truth of the matter is that, this piece of legislation was 30 years overdue, in my opinion, and it speaks to the administration's commitment being championed by the Vice President on the ease of doing business. So this sort of is supposed to smooth the way for companies to form, to dissolve, and to go about their businesses. And some of the things the Special Advisor to the President of Media didn't mention include, for instance, dispensing with the need to have lawyers sign declaration of compliance, dispensing of the need for audits and company secretaries for smaller companies, dispensing of things like a common seal. So it does look like a really good piece of legislation. And this sort of is an attempt maybe to just bring some sanity into the sector and also push for some more transparency and accountability. I mean, I have some concerns, but I don't know if you want to speak.
Yep.
If you want to speak to your thoughts about the bill, whether positive or negative.
So it's a bill that some people say it's a bill with a double-edged sword, and that look, it's both good on this side and probably bad on the other side. So I think we just need to look really very, very controversial, especially the ones that has to do with the power of CAMA, that's the CAC, to actually take over some companies, take over some organizations. And it will have been, if it has limited itself to the fact that if there are corruption, there are issues in those organizations, and the order of the court is sought for such an action to be taken. I will try to remember some of the specific provisions, like Section 823, and also I think Section 842. These are sections that are currently generating controversy. So if we look at that, we'll know that these actually have brought significant concern to a lot of persons, but also there are people in the business sector who are also celebrating that, look, it has helped the ease of doing business in Nigeria. I believe that it is worth scrutinizing, worth examining, and I think that we should do justice to it.
Okay, so let me go quickly to Section 839. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yeah, Section 839, especially 7, Section 8397, provides that after an inquiry into the affairs of the association, that's an organization, if the commission is satisfied to the matters in subsection 1, that's where you have the ambiguous and the tutorial clauses like reasonable beliefs, So these are some of the concerns that people are talking about here.
If I have any concerns about this particular section, it's that it's very subjective. So section 8391 here talks about reasonable belief, and then talks about acting to suspend the trustees of an association if the commission reasonably believes that it's in the public interest.
There is also another one, which is also very important, which people are going to fight, is section 842, whereby the commission is to be notified by banks of dormant money belonging to NGOs. In there. So what is that you want to be raking money from the right, left, center, And I also said something very instructive. Let's not gloss over this. That now, if I decide to maybe make a mistake of probably maybe take or collect his girlfriend in Nigerian parlance, what that means is that they can decide to take over my organization. And you see, though this is yes, we are saying it jokingly, but I think this is a very serious issue. My worry is that there are very important aspects of this bill that actually this thing has that has not done justice to, which these other provisions have done a serious disservice to the good aspect of this bill. For instance, when you look at section 18 of the bill, section 40 of the bill, you go to section 27 of the bill, you go to section 98 of the bill, you go to some other very important sections, you will see that the bill is actually in a way also helping to simplify the process of business governance in Nigeria, because so in terms of governance in respect of business, such that the corporate governance are simplified, ease of doing business, trying to make things very okay and accessible in the way it is done in other climes. So it should have been an innovative law without this distraction. And some persons who are actually not actually concerned about the other aspect of the NGO and CSO, including how to take over of the banks, as it celebrates some of these other important aspects. For instance, there is a provision of a single member shareholder company, which is permissible under section 18.2. There is also introduction of statement of compliance, which this act also introduced this, which can be signed by an applicant or his agent, confirming that. I'm reading from Premium Times now. I like to credit my source, that the Premium Times reported that this serves as an alternative to the requirement to submit a declaration of compliance, which must be signed by a lawyer or attended to before a notary public. So a statement of compliance need not be signed by a lawyer, which is also revolutionary in a way. And I don't know, maybe this will sit well with the MBA, really, because it's like taking jobs away from, some lawyers, which, are always around the CAC office, to do some of their consulting. You'll see that this law, the intendment of this law is actually noble, until the fifth columnist came to insert this.
So this section clauses 78 up to this point, 80, and they talk about the requirements for the registration of a foreign company. And Nigerians will be very, very familiar with the cries or the controversy surrounding claims that we were ceding our sovereignty to China over loans we were taking. To be clear, those clauses were standard clauses in international business. It allows, companies, if you default, it allows them from arbitration to claim your assets. So those are fine. But it was interesting when I came across this particular clause, because what it says is that with a foreign company can apply to the Minister for exemption for provisions to register as other foreign companies would be required to do. If you go to section 81B, it says foreign companies which are in Nigeria for the execution of specific individual loan projects on behalf of a donor country. I mean, a casual reading of this would lend one to think that this was very specifically meant for Chinese contractors working on large infrastructure projects on behalf, being funded by China. And it's just interesting. I won't sit here and say it's good or bad, but it's just interesting to see a clause inserted in Nigerian law that appears to have been written for a specific type of contractor. Even probably more insidious was something that was written for a company called Braipan. Now, Braipan is supposed to be a liquidators association. Let me see if I can get the clause. It's clause 705. And what it says is you're only qualified to act as an insolvency practitioner where you are a member of Braipan, which is the Business Recovery and Insolvency Practitioners Association of Nigeria, or membership of any other professional body. And it's very interesting to find Braipan in Nigerian law, because Braipan is not a chartered institute, it's not a professional body. It's a private members club, basically. It's an association of insolvency practitioners. It's interesting. I think that's really interesting to see private companies being written into Nigerian law.
Yeah, I've listened to argument that it's not going to be limited to that this particular organization alone, but you can take it to the bank that, the CAC would definitely want to make Braipan as a basic requirement, because in the first instance, there was no reason why in a federal law, a national law, why a specific organization should be mentioned among other organizations specifically. What they have succeeded in doing is to give that organization the primacy of first refusal, such that it will always be the first organization to be mentioned that people should actually do business with, So, again, that's self-serving. It's a provision that is self-serving, and I don't know why the National Assembly had to tolerate that. I don't see this law going for the next 5-6 years. I'm sure that if it is not reviewed under the current 9th National Assembly, the next legislative session of the National Assembly will definitely review this CAMA again. So, and I think that people going to mount a lot of pressure, and I also see the possibility of the judicial arm, the court delisting some of the provisions of this very act. That's my take from what I've seen so far, because they will be appropriately challenged. It's going to result into a lot of legal tussle.
So very quickly, pass or fail on this bill?
Good cop, bad cop situation, but there is nothing for me. There is nothing really that's spectacular that is different from what we have before. I know that it's been celebrated here, but fairly speaking, let me say, in terms of the scale of 1 to 10, I would say, 4.5.
I'll be a little bit more generous. And I'm sort of like situating it in the context of the fact that we are facing a fiscal and monetary crisis, we are heading for, I think, not just a recession, but probably a depression. And I think this bill comes at the perfect time. It allows the government draw everyone into the formal sector. And the direct consequence of that is that you pay your filing fees. You are also able to be located and taxed. So I think for the federal government, it's very, very timely. I think the clauses that we have problems with are problematic. But like you said, there are remedies to them. They will be challenged. And I don't think we should throw the baby away with the bathwater. I would give this particular piece of legislation a very healthy 7/10. Moving quickly on to the next story, we're going to talk about the NBC, the National Broadcasting Commission's new code. And I'll read a story from Premium Times. Big headlines: Broadcasting Code. NBC board disagrees with Lai Mohammed, says the minister acted alone. This is a story from Premium Times. And it says, the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, erroneously amended the 6th edition of the Nigeria Broadcasting Code. This is the chairman of the NBC, Ikra Bilbis, speaking here. The minister, while unveiling the review code on August 4th in Lagos, had said that the amendments were necessitated by a presidential directive in the wake of the 2019 general elections. He said the aim was to reposition the NBC for optimum performance. The code, since its amendment, has stirred up controversy in the industry, many Nigerians kicking against its provisions. Many Nigerians view the move as a backdoor attempt to clamp down on free speech, dissent, and the media. In the amended code, the ministry increased the fine for hate speech from 500,000 naira to 5 million. It's actually to 5 million and above. So 5 million is the minimum threshold. It also announced tougher regulation of web broadcasts, among others. Earlier on Thursday, the NBC fined the radio station Nigeria Info 99.3 FM 5 million naira for, in quotes, providing its platform to be used to promote unverifiable and inciting views that can incite crime and public disorder. This decision came after a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Obadiah Mailafia, claimed on radio that a governor of a northern state was the leader of the extremist group Boko Haram. Ariyo, what are your thoughts on this really interesting story?
Thank you very much, Joseph. I think I used a specific word when we talked about CAMA. I said fifth columnist. Now, let me now justify it now. So we have some persons who are actually at the center of this. So they divided some of these provisions, legislations that have been opposed, by Nigerians.
So just to bring our listeners up to speed, there were two very controversial bills that were fiercely resisted in the recent past. The first one was the NGO regulation bill, and yes, the second one was the hate speech bill. So please continue.
Yes. So the hate speech bill and also the fake news bill. So what they've succeeded in doing is to smuggle some into CAMA and also translate some as code under the NBC. And that was why Lai Mohammed, minister, said about hate speech, under the NBC code. I am not averse to regulation. We've made that. That's the best thing to do in every sane climate, to regulate. But you can't be a judge in your own case. That's the concern of many Nigerians. And I think what Lai Mohammed has done is an overreach. The minister is first a Nigerian citizen, an appointee of government. When you want to make this kind of codes, provisions into the NBC code, which is the 6th NBC code, really, the best approach would have been for all the industry players to contribute and to participate. And I can tell you that the current provisions that Lai Mohammed probably deliberately and personally inserted is actually different from what was actually, I think, was passed in Kano by the meeting of the MBC that was held in 2019, which as a result of the 2019 elections, he said that there have been concern in FEC and that therefore they have to do something. FEC is not a representation of Nigerians. FEC are appointees of the president, they are ministers. Even the National Assembly cannot, despite the fact that they are the representative of the people, cannot lay claim in totality to be doing everything that actually satisfy the interests of Nigerians. So number one thing is that, again, these codes also will be challenged. I expect that Nigerian Info will have gone to court by now to challenge these obnoxious fines levied against them by the minister. I also want to commend the MBC board for standing firm and for insisting that what the minister did was very wrong. And that is the best way to go. So we must continue to challenge, some of these offensive provisions that tend to undermine our democracy. Lai Mohammed himself, in opposition, had every reason going well for him. With the courts that are in place today by Lai Mohammed, there is no way Lai Mohammed himself will have survived as an opposition figure based on what is currently recommending. So we must not allow them to gag free speech. We must not allow them to undermine, the democratic space, to shrink the democratic space. So I side with the MBC board, and I also believe that there should also be a legal tussle over this. Also,
looking at the bill itself, setting aside fifth columnists and conspiracy theories, it's a very problematic piece of legislation. For instance, it talks about regulating web presence, and it says 2.0.3, all persons who wish to operate web/online broadcasting services such as us in Nigerian territories shall be registered with the Commission. Web and online platform owners, so such as Zoom or YouTube or whichever platform we decide to broadcast, shall bear liability for every content on their platforms. Content on web platforms shall conform to the provisions of the Code on Programming Standard, especially as it relates to hate speech and fake news. So I wonder how you are going to, for instance, start regulating things broadcast or published on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram. Are you going to be coming, because the NBC won't sanction the people who speak. So in this Obadiah Melafia's case, for instance, Obadiah wasn't sanctioned. It was Nigeria Info that was penalized. So how are you going to regulate, if Obadiah Melafia had gone on YouTube and made that statement from his home in Abuja, how are you going to penalize YouTube? The only way you penalize them, for instance, is to issue a denial of service instruction and to block the website from Nigeria. So is that what the NBC is looking to do? The other thing that, again, just looking at the law itself, the other thing the NBC has tried to do in this law is to come over, and it's very obvious, is to come over the broadcasting of premium sports. The English Premier League, football, pay-per-view, television, and on-demand sports like boxing, etc. And has said, there was a clause that made me laugh, and has said that exclusivity is prohibited. I want to get the exact clause, but it basically says exclusive content is prohibited. And I don't understand if the NBC understands how pay-per-view channels work, not just sports. So for instance, Netflix has original programs. Netflix makes and shows only on Netflix. So, and that is Netflix, attraction. That's Netflix's selling point. They'll say subscribe to our channel because you can get content only from us. We will invest content, our own resources in developing our content that hopefully will attract you. So it seems to on one side to be attacking hate speech, and then on the other side, it seems to have no understanding at all of the way modern broadcasting works.
Also, what they are trying to do is to have total control of everything in terms of the broadcast media and every aspect of the media. They want to control what you say. They want to control what is heard. They want to control every aspect of the media. That is why they are rushing into some of those things without actually thinking it's true. So in essence, when you look at what they are asking the broadcast industry to do, is number one, it is either you don't do a personality program, guest program, inviting guests live to come and talk on burning and salient issues. Number one. Number two, if you're going to invite guests, if you're going to talk about burning and salient issue, then make everything a recorded program such that you are able to edit out an aspect that you think will violate what Lai Mohammed and his people, have put into the code. So, but if, in addition to that, if you are not recording, what that means is that, look, whoever is going to invite to your live program and you are not invited, you should be a pro-government person that you are reasonably satisfied that this is not going to criticize our government. So these are the three issues and probably more that you can deduce, from what they are asking the broadcast organizations, the broadcast media to do. And this cannot stand the test of time. It's as good as killing the business. In all of this, I don't think Lai Mohammed is looking at the opportunity of growing this critical sector in Nigeria that provides jobs for thousands and thousands of people. What they want to do is to gradually kill everything, because it is only a robust broadcast media that can actually generate jobs that will interest the people. A broadcast media organization that operates based on government patronage, it doesn't really excite the people. Lai Mohammed in opposition enjoyed this benefit, and we shouldn't allow that to happen. So I agree with everybody who is actually attacking this code, and the fact that some of this code also violate sections of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and I think this is section 44 thereabouts, and also section 55. These codes also violate some of the provisions, that have been put in place. Violate section 39 of the 1999 Constitution too. So when you look at it, you realize that these are not codes they were, thought through. And in addition to that, codes are like the NBC code are subsidiary of subsidiary legislation, in the sense that the NBC Act itself is a subsidiary legislation, in the sense that the Constitution is the ground norm, is the supreme document. So every other document derives strength and power from the Constitution. So the NBC Code derived its own existence from the NBC Act. And I don't think that when you look at the NBC Act, I don't think the Act can even sustain what some of these provisions that have been, obnoxious provisions that have been inserted into codes, and these codes violate the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria. So I know it cannot stand, and it's important that all critical players come together, to ensure that there is an urgent review. We want the industry to grow. We know there are concerns about hate speeches. There are concerns about what people say sometimes. But look, the only way to counter fake news is to put the alternative facts out. The only way to counter hate speech is for people, to say, what is actually the truth. So it is not by attacking everything with draconian legislation. We have enough laws in Nigeria to address some of the concerns that Lai Mohammed, is doing everything to bring in laws and codes just, with the intention of shutting down, dissent in Nigeria. And all this cannot stand, really. Also.
So I'll put on the screen, I don't know if you can see it, it's clause 628. In the broad national interest, exclusivity of sporting rights in Nigeria is prohibited. I just wanted you guys to see it so you don't think we're making stuff up. Going sort of like looking at the drafters of this particular amendment to the code, as impressed as I was by the previous document we just looked at, the CAMA Act 2020, I think I am disappointed by the sloppiness of this. And it goes just all the way back to, questions about whether the DG of the commission of the NBC and or Lai Mohammed have the power to create codes, and they don't. So the Establishment Act of the commission itself says the power to create and regulate the code is one of the responsibilities of the commission. And the commission is made up of the chairman, it's made up of the director general, and 10 other members. It's not within the purview of the minister to hijack, to instruct. It's not within the purview of the presidential committee, no matter how constructed. The responsibility, the singular body responsible for creating and owning the NBC code is the commission as described by the Establishment Act of the NBC itself. So in the first instance, that is why the board is kicking against what Lai Mohammed has done. It's not his document, it's not his code, it's theirs. I mean, in the second instance, you talked about, the constitution being the ground norm, and then the act, and then the code. This bit of legislation also talks about competition, and the problem with its take on competition within the industry is that we actually have the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Agency, I think, that is responsible for all matters of monopolies and anti-competition, and actually says in their laws that when any other agency of government speaks to regulating competition, the FCCPA takes priority, is above every other agency. So this talk, they have a whole section about anti-competition here. It's irrelevant because the FCCPA is already administering antitrust and anti-competition regulation. If I have any question, and this you'll probably be able to answer this, Ariyo, because of your experience with the civil society. We've just looked at two laws that appear to have managed to sneak in two bills that were resisted by Nigerians, the NGO bill and the hate speech bill. How did that happen to fly under the nose of not just opposition party members in the National Assembly, not just the press, but also civil society actors?
Yeah, also, first you realize that this is a government that its mindset is command and control, and that's exactly what you're saying. Replicating in policies, actions, legislation, including the MBC code that Lai Mohammed has just released, as is generating this controversy. You can't blame the civil society that much, including the media, because we're talking about a ninth National Assembly that is pliable, that is seen as almost 100% pro the executive. So some of these things were done, off radar, and people couldn't really see some of those provisions. You have to give it to these CSOs, the media, and activists who had resisted, this as separate legislation. But now they've been unbundled and are being inserted into different other, assembly for amendment. So nobody is sleeping over this. And I believe that, and that's part of the reasons why we are here too, in order to continue to sensitize the public for them to be aware that, look, these obnoxious provisions must be challenged. I know that this podcast is very important. It's not just to critique, but also to appraise, and also where necessary to comment if some reasonable things have been done by either the government at the national, subnational, at the local level, including private players who are doing a lot of things in our country. But we will have to place this where it is. It is not good enough that legislations, bills that are rejected by Nigerians are, unbundled and spread across other legislation. Is a serious disservice to the people, and it's not good enough. In some other climes, it could lead to impeachment. Also,
I was very generous in giving the last bit of legislation a 7. I think it was well deserved. Because I don't think this is a piece of legislation. I think it's just a contraption, because I don't think a lot of thought was given to it. It seemed, the amendment seemed, to have been written to just push through a couple of predetermined outcomes that don't appear on the face of it or even beneath the surface to be in the national interest. I would score this a big fat 0. It's not worth our time. I think it should be resisted in courts and by the MPC board. Because what they are trying to do, again, not talking about the exclusivity argument, what they're trying to do has been done elsewhere. But I think they should just find a way to structure it in a way that's acceptable and communicate it in a way that is reasonable and doesn't scare business away. That's what I think they should do. What would you score this bill?
Yeah, maybe I should be more generous than you this time around. Maybe I should score them 1.5. There are 1 or 2 other codes that are probably very important, but the entire thing has been rubbished really by what the minister himself has made as the reason why that code was amended in the first place. Like I said, they should be forward-looking. Codes law should be about helping the industry to grow, corporate governance, standard best practices. That should be the mindset, not to gag, to command, to control, to hammer. That mentality, we just have to do away with it, and I don't think it's the best thing. So I think Lai Mohammed should have a rethink. If he's tired, I think Lai Mohammed should go home and go and take care of his grandchildren. If he's tired. I think the man is tired.
That's noted. Hopefully he listens to this podcast and he might take your suggestion under advisement. Moving quickly on, we will look at the job figures. A couple of days ago, the National Bureau of Statistics released unemployment figures for Nigeria. I'll read a quick story from Premium Times again. The headline goes, Nigeria's unemployment rate rises to 27.1%. So the story goes, Nigeria's unemployment rate rose to 27.1% in the second quarter of 2020, the National Bureau of Statistics said on Friday. The report comes several quarters after the Statistics Bureau released its last report in 2018. The new rate is an increase from 23.1% unemployed in the third quarter of 2018. The Nigerian economy has been hit by the impact of coronavirus amid depleting oil revenues. Experts have said that the economic downturn will affect employment generation as companies cut costs and lay off workers to stay afloat. Obviously, the unemployment figures have risen from 23.1% to 27.1%. If you break down the story, it shows that, I'm trying to see if I can find the story. It shows that women have been impacted more than men by unemployment. As expected, young people have borne the brunt of this. And it's crazy because when you look at combined unemployment and underemployment, it's up to 55.7%. Youth unemployment has gone up to, again, combined unemployment and underemployment has gone up to 63%. Only 1 in 3 young people are in full employment today in Nigeria. Women, again, has gone up to 63%, as badly hit as the youth. And I think the worst statistic when you look at the breakdown was the NBS did a breakdown of job numbers or unemployment by education level. It's more like you are more likely to be unemployed if you have a university education than if you just attended primary or secondary school. So if you're a graduate, your odds of being unemployed are higher than if you had just, done primary school, taken your primary school leaving certificate and entered the job market. Only 40% of BSc holders in Nigeria are in full-time employment. And, it's the thing though is that if you look at the states, so we have been discussing, the global unemployment figures. If you look at the states, it's a mixed bag. So you have Imo State, for instance, having 75% combined unemployment rates. It's crazy. Only 1 in 4 in Imo State is in full employment. The most shocking, I think, was Kaduna State, that has 73% unemployment and underemployment. Looking at Kaduna, that's surprising because of what appears to have been the good work they've been doing in agriculture and ease of business. I think they were rated number 1. All the foreign direct investments coming into the states. Maybe that's been all of those gains have been eroded by the insecurity in the state as well. But that's the state with the total highest rates of unemployment. I think for me, the outlier, and it's something that we may look to, is that some of the states that had really, really high, so 2 points, some of the states that had really, really high security issues, Zamfara, for instance, and Borno, had relatively low unemployment figures. Zamfara was 14%, I think only beaten by Anambra State, for instance. And the other thing was that between 2018, when the last job report was published, and now, about 10 million people have left the labor force. So the labor force is actually smaller than it was in 2018. The MBS doesn't give a reason as to why this has happened, but maybe you have something to say about that.
Yeah, also, you see, very interesting report. First, let me commend Mr. Yemi Kale of MBS, and the fact that they've been very consistent in adopting almost the same procedure without actually trying to buckle under political pressure, from politicians, even though I know that they were concerned that the initial report that was released was deleted or probably taken down, kind of. But nevertheless, this report is out and a lot of people are digesting it. I know that politicians are either uncomfortable or comfortable with this report simply because sometimes your political opponents, extract the data from this report to actually, to campaign against you, especially if it's an election year where reports and data are very, very valuable to election campaign. You see, why some Nigerians will continue to criticize the MBS report, and rightly so, is something that we are not actually looking at. You see, Nigerian population figure is a rigged one. It is not thorough. Our population figure is not thorough. It's not the real population figure. So that's why some people are saying that they cannot understand, except maybe we also have to look at certain things sometimes, in terms of comparing Borno, Yobe, Zamfara, and also possibly Imo and Akwa Ibom, for instance. Yeah, I also agree that in Akwa Ibom, Imo, you have more graduates, you have more people, looking for probably jobs than you have in Borno and Yobe. But what will continue to cause concern is our population numbers, now. However, I think that when you look at the case of Borno, Yobe, is it that of young people packing out of the states that they've gone to fend for, survival? Possibly, some of them are in the IDP camp, and also the same thing applies to, Zamfara and others. So basically, I can't fault the MBS, the statistics that have been used. Don't let us forget that this is a data that is coming against the backdrop of the COVID-19, pandemic, and also the lockdown, whereby, a lot of people have lost jobs. Aside losing jobs, some people have graduated and looking for more jobs, So a lot of youths, are available without little or nothing, to do. So the numbers are alarming, and it has worsened from what we have in 2018, and it's probably continue to get, worse. Now that it's even the fear now is the fact that we've been projected that Nigeria is headed recession. Some people are saying it's depression, and I don't know if we have anything to be able to salvage this situation. What that means is that the job numbers, unemployment number will continue to tank one way or the other, because we are not likely, I don't think there is any silver bullet, to be able to solve this problem currently, and I have not seen any robust intervention to address this concern. So it is not enough, just to release the numbers, the fact that we have the willpower to be able to address it. I know that some governors are now making a political capital, trying to take this as something political and something that is not okay with them. I heard that is it the governor of Akwa Ibom has rejected the number. Yes. that the governor of Akwa Ibom has rejected the number, believing that they've created jobs, created lots of opportunities for Akwa Ibom youth. And look, nothing says, let's get this also very important also. Nothing says a state cannot have its own independent reports. Nothing. That is why you have a Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economic Development. That's why you can have a unit to look into your state statistics. Nigeria is a federation, and the nationals are reasonably. I don't think there is any law, any law in Nigeria that prohibits a state from, generating its own data and ensure that there is consistency, because the value that the MBS has had is the fact that there is a consistency and they can defend the mechanism and the methodology for generating their data, their analysis, their findings. They have everything to defend it. Any governor who is not satisfied, or any level of government that is not satisfied with the data that is coming out from MBS should please, go beyond criticism. They should put in place their own research methodology for assessing, their own data, socio-economic data, every week, every month, year in, year out, so that they will be able to show to MBS that indeed you have not fact-checked us, reasonably well. So the numbers are quite alarming and not quite encouraging. And like I said, the COVID-19 has worsened things, for a badly run economy. So I'm not expecting anything, positive from that result when we heard that result was going to come out. In fact, many Nigerians would have expected that it would have been probably more alarming, that by now they would have been talking about almost about 30-something%. But again, it's not too bad, really, for an economy that is already almost in a comatose. And I believe that the only thing we should be talking now is how to salvage this economy, because the numbers are quite, and numbers are very important. And for anybody also at the center who wants to also debunk this number, they should also very important that, it's also very important for them to know that the numbers were always there when, some people aligned with, the fact that Nigeria was not growing well. So I think we should commend the MBS and commend their head, Mr. Yemi Kale also.
So just quick housekeeping. I think the MBS is the only body permitted to publish statistical information. It's very similar to the National Population Commission. So you would expect that states would be able to publish statistical population data, but it's only the Population Council that can actually go about and take a census. And it's little things like this that I think gets in the way of our progress when you are hampered from finding out how many people are in your state, from finding out how many people have jobs, etc., and you have to wait on the federal to come down and provide this information for you, regardless of how good they are. So that's a problem there.
But I don't think, I don't think there is any specific law. And I believe there is a way this can be circumvented. I believe there is a way that, for instance, in terms of even the population number, the only thing is just that the federal government will not work with your number. They will not work with it. But I don't think the federal government has the power to prosecute a state for, trying to get the numbers in that, very state. I remember vividly that Lagos State, remember during the last population census, when Lagos State was put at par with Kano at 9 point something million, and Lagos State told Nigerians then that based on their own internal, examination, that Lagos State as at that time was close to about 20 million people. And they challenged the federal government, that to that effect, that the figure that the federal government had put out was an underrepresentation of the population of Lagos. So I believe that the state should go beyond just criticizing, the figures that are made available to actually bring about, what they think is the real fact, but it has to be scientific. It has to be research-based. It must be proven. It must be empirical and can be independently verified by any other person. That's my take, Osaka.
Yeah. So again, thank you. So just going a little bit deeper into the numbers. Akwa Ibom was doing, let me get the figure out. Akwa Ibom's job numbers was 45. This is just unemployment, not unemployment and unemployment. Akwa Ibom's unemployment numbers were 45.2%. If you combine it with underemployment, which was 21, Akwa Ibom's unemployment goes up to 67.9, about 68%. The next Niger Delta, the next South state was Bayelsa. Bayelsa's unemployment was 28%, 27.8, 28%. Cross River's unemployment was 31.6%. Delta was 40.3%. I think the only South states that came off, below the national average was Edo State at 19%. And it leads you to ask that why would the states that produce Nigeria's oil, the South, why would they have such horrible job figures? And there are several things. I think one of them would be that, and this is an argument that was put forward for Rivers particularly, was that Rivers and Bayelsa, is that the exploration of oil, because most of these communities were fishing and agrarian communities, and the exploration of oil has damaged fishing areas and has damaged farmlands. So you find everybody looking for, city jobs, because rural jobs do not exist. Either looking for city jobs or going off into the shadows. So you're having your modular refine, your artisanal refiners. You're having your pseudo security forces, and again, you also need to understand that remember there was a divide between primary school graduates and university graduates. Down south, you will find more people going to finishing secondary school and going into universities. And that's unfortunately the demographic that is unable to find jobs. But again, with the resources accruing to those states, it's problematic that you'll be having such a high level of unemployment. Interestingly enough, the NGOs says 10 people have fallen off the labor force. I'll give you an interesting statistic. People who have been added, who are now on the social register, receiving handouts from the federal government, are about 10 million. I think they're about 11 million now. So is there any correlation between people who have stopped looking for jobs and people who have now been onboarded onto the social register, receiving handouts from the federal government?
Some of these state governments probably, maybe they should hear this from someone like me. Let me say, from what I can deduce sometimes from certain things that they are doing, not very well, is in the process of awarding contract. Look, some of these things, projects are not cast in stone. If you want to construct a road project, you go and give it to a Chinese company, you give it to a foreign firm, and those ones are going to put a lot of calculation into it. Now, there are a lot of things sometimes that you can take off some of these things. For instance, there are certain constructions that you can decide to, engage 2,000, 5,000 people to get along, or probably when they are doing their contract, specification and arrangement, and probably they are able to agree with the firm that is, handling it, the number of, people that will be employed to work on, on some of these contracts. It should be people-centered, people-driven. And there is no reason why some of these states should not have engineering department that can handle reasonably, some road constructions, not all road constructions I know, but, village roads, township roads, and some of this, they should be able to graduate up to that level in such a way that, almost all the manpowers are domiciled within the state. That's a way of, creating wealth, getting the youth busy and employed. But every now and then, small contracts is awarded to a foreign firm, small contracts are awarded to somebody somewhere. That's now to govern. The countries today that are doing well, the developed nations, they looked inward, to be able to help themselves. If they didn't do that, there won't be angels. Angels didn't come from heaven to construct roads for some of those other countries. They grew from point A, from the lowest part. They grew, and we are not making any effort at all. Everything, if it's not China, if it's not Julius Berger, if it is not this, no. At what point in time are we really going to get it well? So, for me, I think that the governors who are complaining about the data for MBS, I think is totally, unreasonable. They should have an independent assessment if they think they are not comfortable. I think that's my own assessment of this, and I think it's also a clarion call on the federal government to know that, look, things are really getting very, very bad, and there is need to act now. Unfortunately, we are borrowing more, going into debt. In fact, I didn't even check that of Osun State. Do you know Osun State is in a very precarious situation currently now? I think it's 90% of Osun State's allocation is spent on, servicing debt, and that's scandalous. So,
but let me surprise you. Osun State's unemployment figures 15.3%.
That's interesting.
I think Osun State is a civil servant state. And
yes.
You also remember that it's an agreement. They do a lot of farming there as well.
Absolutely.
And these job figures capture, white collar jobs, blue collar jobs. So,
and the young people don't stay in that state. They all move to Lagos. That's what. All the states around Lagos, Osun, the young people move to Lagos to go and look for jobs.
The federal government says it's going to create 774,000 jobs by giving 1,000 jobs in each local government, each of the 774 local government areas. But it's saying that it will be paying people about 20,000 a month, which is less than the minimum wage even. So the federal government, will come out and boast that it has created 774,000 jobs during the pandemic. But the truth of the matter is that those jobs are barely that. They are barely, you could barely call them jobs because they are below the minimum wage. They have not a living wage. But it is a way of getting money into the pockets of people in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a recession, in the midst of the fact that we are currently the poverty capital of the world. So I cannot be too critical of that scheme just because I'm aware of the fact that we are a very, very cash-strapped nation. Moving quickly on to our final topic, we're going to talk about Edo State. I mentioned that Edo's unemployment figures were 19%. In 2018, Edo's unemployment figures were 25.1%. So it's interesting that you've seen a consistent downward trend. And I use the word consistent very lightly because there's been a 1-year gap between 2018 and this publication in 2020. So nobody really knows what happened in that gap. But Edo's job figures have come down significantly. We have a governor who is going to be, will be having an election for his second term next month in about 30 days' time. So these job numbers are very, very, they came at the perfect time for him. I always say that any politician going into an election, on the back of the fact that he's creating jobs is in a normal world is an unbeatable candidate. But what takes us to Edo isn't the job numbers, it's actually politics. And I will bring up a story and read about Edo State. So the Edo Assembly Speaker has obtained an order of substituted service on the members-elect in a bid to halt the unlawful takeover of the Assembly complex and legislative activities. So this is from Business Day, and it says that Honorable Francis Okiye, the Speaker of the Edo State House of Assembly, has obtained an order of substituted service of members-elect to halt the unlawful takeover of the Anthony Enaro Assembly complex and the House's legislative activities. Ariyo, what's going on in Edo State?
Yeah, also, you see, when we look at this critical, sometimes they say the more you look, the less you see. And that defines why suddenly lawmakers who had refused to honor the proclamation issued by the governor to converge and be sworn in individually by the speaker are now in the business of trying to hijack legislative business. Let me say this. The Constitution is very clear, I think, in Section 109. Look, it requires 181 days for you to, yes, you must have sat for 181 days, in a legislative year. But if you absent yourself, for 1/3 of 181, 1/3 of 181, then you shall cease to be a member, of that house. It means that you have lost your constituency seat. And what is 1/3 of 181? That's about 61 days. And let me say this, as at the time that these estranged lawmakers went to court to challenge the proclamation issued by the governor, as at the time the verdict of that suit was issued, they had already lost their seat. The legislative business of that house had gone past 61 days. But the speaker, actually in his wisdom, then had allowed them to remain, had extended it till December, thinking that it is probably, maybe, from my own reading, thinking that maybe it has to deal with 181 days. No, it's actually 61 days, which is 1/3 of 181. Now, the seats of these lawmakers have been declared vacant. the appropriate thing for them is if they think that the speaker had acted, beyond the reach of his power, the most appropriate would have been for them to actually, call for additional prayer in a subsisting suit, or probably institute another legal, action against, that
They did.
suspension, which I think they did.
They did.
Since they did, they are bound by the fact that they have submitted their yearnings, frustration to the the court of law, and the court of law has a responsibility to it. But now what they've done is to resort to self-help by trying to take over the Edo State House of Assembly, by declaring themselves as as members, and also trying to use dissenting voices in the 10 number of 10, I think between 10 and 12 number of lawmakers who are currently, sitting, who decided on their own to actually abide by that provision that will require them to take oaths before the speaker. And what that means is that, look, these lawmakers who refuse, to participate in the ritual, the constitutional ritual that is expected of a lawmaker, they've lost their seat forever. So what they are doing is just a desperate attempt to claw at, the back of, what do you call it? It's like a sinking car. So they're trying to claw. I think this is the last straw, So, and it's difficult for them. And one thing they are also using it to do is to distract what is actually going on. And like I said, the mudslinging and the infighting and controversy between the governor and the former national chairman has actually robbed the governor of, showcasing the legacy of his administration for weeks, for months. A lot of people are unable to grapple with, the achievements and performance of Governor Obaseki, simply because when you talked about Edo today, the only thing you remember is Obaseki versus Edo. I think that's one minus on the part of the governor that the governor has failed to do, because, look, you must devise a strategy of selling yourself. Nobody's going to sell you. It is you that must sell yourself. And the fact that there are crises, there are crises, the fact that there is a problem doesn't mean that, you can't find an alternative to selling yourself. So, also, something is brewing, which I need to let you know. You see, suddenly there is a judgment of the Court of Appeal that has validated that, the 22 deregistered party by Anenih, which had which their deregistration was validated by the Federal High Court. Suddenly, the Court of Appeal, making a U-turn from a similar judgment that I delivered before, has suddenly said that the 22 political parties were wrongfully excluded. And suddenly, the people who have no money or anything now have two senior advocates of Nigerian prosecuting their matter, and because INEC has said that it's going to appeal this judgment to the Supreme Court. So they've gotten two SN, to participate in the matter. What that means is that there is already a very deep-rooted interest in this matter, because you know why? These 22 parties are now demanding that they have to be part of Edo election. And what that means is that INEC have to start from square one to be able to accommodate them from the point of giving a notice about a governorship election. So they want to stalemate the entire election, create a system where probably it's the Speaker of the House of Assembly that will actually act as a pro tem, as an acting governor who is going to actually oversee the conduct of a governorship, election. So what they are plotting is for the current process to be nullified, either before or after the election. So it's going to be another interesting case at the level of the Supreme Court, because people will want to know, because the decision of the Supreme Court will definitely make or mar whatever is the outcome of the the 2020 governorship election in Edo State, which is scheduled for September 19. So by and large, I think that the gladiators are not really resting, and it's more or less like a fight to finish. And look, they are pummeling each other on every front, on all angles. So also, it's a dicey situation.
So I'll roll back a little bit further. I think on both sides, on all sides, there have been own goals and mistakes that have sort of led us to this point. So going all the way back to the decision of the APC to disqualify their a sitting governor, I think was a mistake, and I think it gave the PDP a shot at reclaiming the state. Regardless of whatever issues the governor might have had with Oshomole, I think that decision to send him out of the party has cost the APC. It was an unwise, it wasn't a politically savvy decision to make. I think the inability of those two combatants to resolve this issue has cost the APC, regardless of whether they win or lose, regardless of who wins the election. I also think that because of the confusion around the suspension of Oshomole and the acting chairman's decision, Gaidom, to write a letter to INEC, it has put Pastor Ezeyamu's candidacy in jeopardy, because Gaidom wrote to INEC informing INEC that the APC primaries had been postponed, and he never took it back. Gaidom was also asked by the president, I think, to convene a NEC emergency meeting, which he doesn't have the constitutional powers to do per the APC constitution. An emergency NEC can only be convened by a national working committee by giving 7 days notice. It was convened by Gaidom, who only gave about 48 hours notice. So everything that has come out from NEC, so the dissolution of Gaidom and his national working committee, the appointment of the caretaker and Governor Bunu as the caretaker chairman of the party, the ratification of Ezeyamu's candidacy and submission of said ratification to INEC, everything that happened since then has been an illegality. And I think some APC members and even the PDP and other political parties are challenging the processes that led to the emergence of Ezeyamu as the APC's candidate. I also then think that this is looking at the decision of the Speaker of the Edo State House of Assembly to declare the seats vacant. He doesn't have the power to do so. If you refer to Oloye versus Alegbe, I think, was the Supreme Court judgment in 1983 that says the Speaker cannot declare seats vacant because by section 109 of the F, I think, of the Constitution, 1F of the Constitution, as you quoted, the seats automatically become, and that was the word, that was the word the Supreme Court used. Your seats automatically become vacant when you don't meet the threshold for attendance. And then what the Speaker can do, the Speaker is not powerless. The Speaker can then say, because your seats are now vacant, you are no longer a member as per the Constitution. Your salaries will be suspended. The Sergeant of Arms will be instructed to prevent you from sitting. And if the members that their seats are now vacant have any issue with any of these things, they can then approach the courts to try to seek redress. I don't think the Speaker of the Edo State House of Assembly was aware of this provision. And if he had acted in line with the Supreme Court judgment, the conversation may have gone differently. obviously, what has happened subsequently, the attempt to invade the House of Assembly, the creation of the maze, of a fake maze, the inauguration of members-elect whose seats are constitutionally now vacant. All of that is just a charade and a distraction. And as an analyst, it would be one of two things. Either there's a strategy to try and get the speaker in, so there's a constitutional crisis if for any reason the elections don't hold on the 19th of September and the governor's tenure elapses before the elections hold. Or I think maybe more pragmatically, it was just supposed to be a show of force from one side to show that it had federal might behind it, as evidenced by the letter from the Attorney General instructing the Inspector General of Police to provide security cover for the inauguration of these members. But it's interesting. Edo State, it's interesting. They are playing, on the surface, it might not seem like it, but they are playing very, very high-level politics. And then you spoke about, it being a negative on the part of the governor that they are not speaking about his engagements or his achievements, whatever they might be. But I actually think it might actually be a very clever gambit, and we won't know till the elections are held, because the contest has become very, very clearly about godfatherism and whether the state wants to accept it and whether the state wants to reject it. It hasn't been about performance, it hasn't been about corruption, it hasn't been about security. These job numbers that have come out will have no bearing at all on the outcome of the election. It's almost become a one-issue campaign, and the governor is saying, I want to reject it, and I think I'm fighting godfatherism and thuggery and the looting of the treasury, and the other side represents godfatherism and everything that is bad. And they have managed to frame that conversation. Whether it's a winning strategy, I don't know, but the Obaseki campaign has very successfully framed this election around one issue, and that one issue is godfatherism. Whether it will help them win or whether it will harm them, the voters will decide on September 19th. So, guys, that brings us to the end of our first podcast. It's been an interesting conversation. We've gone from fifth columnist in the CAMA Act to hate speech to unemployment to political brigandage and maneuvering. I hope you guys had fun. I did. We will try to we will come to you every week, once a week, and we will discuss, just like we've done, at a high level and closer to the ground, on topical issues as they affect Nigeria, the people, its politics, and our policies. We have been Igbo Baja, Anenih.
Igbo Baja is here to stay, and you should expect more from us. It's going to get better and better and better with empirical facts, data, and statistics. So until we come your way, on the next edition, my name is Ariyo Dare-Atoye. Thank you.
And again, my name is Anenih. Bye.